Little Guts, and today we're going to focus on chiropractic for developmental delay. And I'm here with Dr. Kassie from Mama's Chiropractic, which is where I took Nathaniel, where I went when I was pregnant also. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kassie.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. Definitely, this is the area that I've been focusing a lot of my energy, my research, and a lot of the seminars I go to is for this, because we have 1 out of 6 kids now that are on either learning disabilities or spectrum disorders, and so it's definitely something that as chiropractors we're really trying to do more of, just because it has to do with the nervous system. And so I started my journey actually when I was 5. I figured out that I wanted to be a chiropractor, and so it was a long time ago. It was because of traumatic birth of my brother, who was born with Erb's palsy, which, if some of you don't know what that is, it's kind of like you're pulled out at birth, and then sometimes your whole arm can go paralyzed. And so his arm was blue and paralyzed, and my mom was like, I think I'm going to bring him to the chiropractor on the way home. And so they did all these nerve tests with needles, and they had determined the whole arm was paralyzed for life. And so on the way home from the hospital, Mom brings him to the chiropractor. Through chiropractic care, the arm starts to wake up. And so that was just a cool experience for me, that the dead noodle arm is now a fully functional arm, and my brother was able to play all the sports,
Wow,
date and do all that stuff. Yeah. And so that was just kind of like my story as a kid. I was like, this is what I have to do. I have to help the brain and body communicate to sometimes wake up an entire limb that's sleeping if there's no information going to it. So the difference of life my brother would have had if we would have not, done anything for his nervous system and his arm. And so my focus then went from, newborns, but then also how can I help kids chiropractically so that in school they're able to thrive, they're able to have good social interactions with other kids, they're able to focus and not be put necessarily on medicine if that's not the cause of it. And so then through chiropractic school, I was starting to take the pediatric seminars. There's 14 seminars that you take to be a certified pediatric chiropractor. You have to do case studies as well, and it's really in-depth learning. And so we have a lot of people that don't even know what chiropractors do, especially for kids. Why would I bring my kid to a chiropractor if they don't have headaches, they don't have the neck and back pain type of stuff going on that we would think we would bring somebody to the chiropractic for? And it's essentially, as chiropractors, what we're doing is we're not necessarily treating neck or back pain, we're not treating spectrum disorders, we're not treating constipation or things like that. What we're doing is we're allowing the brain and body to communicate better. Mm-hmm. And so the nervous system through the brain and the spinal cord, from that spinal cord goes all the information to every organ. So we're not necessarily we're not adjusting the body to solve those symptoms. We're helping brain and body communicate better, and whatever happens with that, whether your kid is able to start focusing, sleeping better, your kid is able to digest their foods, they're going to the bathroom every day, things like that is the result that we see through working with the nervous system. So we're nervous system doctors. That's why also we see a lot of babies, because it starts at birth. If you have birth trauma day 1, then you're already having less information going from the brain to the body. And what does the brain need, for growth? It needs glucose, it needs oxygen, and it also needs physical stimulation. So if you're not getting proper information all the way down, all the way up, then that part of the brain is not getting stimulated and is not growing properly. And so we can already tell when the kid's an infant whether or not there's good enough information going on both sides on what parts of the brain are going to develop more than others. And so if we can feed those pathways to the front of the brains that then help with understanding our sensory world, then already from the start of life we're making huge changes in this little one. So how sensory processing, how we look at it as chiropractors that are trained pediatrically, is very different than maybe if you go to a pediatrician or like an APGAR score or whatnot. You can have a great APGAR score, but what we're looking at is to see is there sensation there? Are all the organs there? Good. But we're not being picky about, how loud is it firing? Is it firing really loud, or is it under firing? Is it even present, that reflex? All the baby reflexes that we test here in the office, there's a lot of them, and they tell us a lot about the sensory environment that the kid is then going to grow into and how they're going to experience their environment. We have 3 different parts of that nervous system that have to develop in the proper order in order for then the kid to stack those properly, and then the milestones and everything that occurs in their early years are done properly, and that the nervous system is able to adapt to that. So kind of like if you were to put a fresh pair of socks on, your body after a while will stop telling you socks, right? But at the beginning you're like, oh, socks, socks, socks. Well, for these kids with sensory processing disorders, you're essentially hearing socks all the time. And so to try to focus on a teacher when you're feeling your socks, you're feeling hands, you're feeling anything on your face is distracting you. Or you have troubles with adapting to certain things like sounds, or visually you're overstimulated. It's a lot of information, especially for new parents, because like they've never heard that chiropractic helps.
Right.
But yet there's so much out there now, so much more information about the sensory processing and how these reflexes and how all of it ties in. And so we help parents equip them with like, okay, if you have a kid that's hypersensitive to touch, let's find ways to make like fun activities, like let's play, in Play-Doh, or let's walk barefoot in the sand, or let's do things to activate and feed that reflex that is seeking, so that then the body can be like, okay, I now understand, and they can integrate that and then move on to the next next set of reflexes until we have neurotypical behavior. And so we see a lot of kids that even come in and they've been on medication, they've tried lots of different things, but if it's not a chemical issue in the brain, which usually it's not, the majority of the time it's not a chemical issue, then we're able to start working through all of that and rewiring the brain, because you can rewire a brain tremendously before the age of 7, and still with old age they're realizing neuroplasticity and how much we can change. And so that's why every adjustment, the power of being able to free up brain and body communication so the body can do the healing is huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of parents have probably not even gotten an adjustment themselves from an adult, mainstream chiropractor.
Yeah.
So what is an adjustment?
That's a great question. So an adjustment is often done by hand. With kids, you won't use more pressure than you would to see like if a tomato's ripe, or as much pressure as you put on your own eyeball. And so it's very light, because kids have a lot of space between their joints, and they're growing, and so we don't need to use very much pressure at all. And what an adjustment is you find the part of the spine between the brain and body where we're having interference, wherever that can cause all sorts of different communication issues within the body, and then the body to the nervous system to the organs. And so what an adjustment will look like, it will be a hands-on adjustment. We do 8 years of training to figure out what part of the spine that we need to adjust. Okay, so what it is a hand-on adjustment. We'll find the part of the spine that's out of alignment, that's not allowing the brain and body to communicate really well, and it'll just be light pressure as much as you put on a tomato, and the adjustment can be just holding and feeling the body release underneath it. There can be a quick little impulse, and then how we adjust each part of the spine will be different depending on what we feel as far as with our hands. With a little baby, with an infant, sometimes we'll use our hands this way. We might have a little box that'll help with the adjustment so that we don't have to use very much pressure at all. So it's very different than with an adult. Sometimes with an adult, some chiropractors will use a little bit more pressure when giving an adjustment, but it's never supposed to be uncomfortable. And if ever we hear a lot of people will ask about like pops and cracks, and all of that is a change in pressure. So it's not bones grinding on each other or anything like that, and it's done in a way that is the way the spine is supposed to be.
So have you seen a lot of kids with developmental delays, like speech delay, or like you were talking about sensory processing disorder?
Yep.
When you see them, have you and you've started adjusting them, how often do you adjust them, and what kind of improvements have you seen over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how often we'll adjust somebody depends on each individual case, depending on their neurology, what we see, okay, are you holding your adjustments or not, and what type of work we're trying to do neurologically. And so when we have kids that we can tell that have more of the brain firing patterns, we want to help retrain those. What we'll do is sometimes we'll have to see them twice a week for a couple weeks to see, okay, now your brain is starting to fire that way and we're starting to hold our patterns. And so, yeah, the goal is for us as chiropractors, if we're trying to do neurological work, like for example, if we have kids that have, like you mentioned, speech delays, or kids that have hypersensitivities to like clothing, or like I had a little boy last week that came in and he did not even want to wear underwear, he didn't want to wear socks, he had to go to school without shoes on. And so that's when we're going through a sensory window, and at that time I'll either see them twice a week or once a week, just so that we can get those through the couple weeks of sensory windows while the brain is doing a lot of rewiring and we're seeing a lot of those reflexes kind of come up. It gives us a really good chance as chiropractors to put input into that nervous system and help them with that rewiring process. And so it really depends on the individual case, what's going on. If we have people that are on the autism spectrum, which we've seen several of those patients, initially we'll see them a little bit more, but then as they're starting to hold their corrections, then what we can start doing is more stimulating that part of the brain that we're trying to activate in order to help them be able to deal with their sensory environment. And so
so have you had any kids that, the first time they come in, they don't just lay down for you to adjust them and they freak out or anything? Yeah. Okay.
So I would say probably most of our pediatric population that we see here, they're always you have to earn that trust in a kid. You have to come to their level. You have to be able to play with them at times to get them to even want to go into the office, first of all, and to get adjusted. So a lot even of our exams is like games. It looks like we're drawing things, we're playing, but I'm doing a lot of testing and seeing how are the reflexes firing, and the whole time we could be playing on the floor with cars or Barbies. And so definitely friendly approach is the best way with kids. And we'll usually start with trying to just slowly stimulate that touch reflex, because a lot of kids, it's so loud to them that they just can't deal with it and they start panicking. And so the kids that have the tag issues, clothes issues, all that stuff, we have to find ways to, while we're playing, be able to feel their spines. And over time we also get the parents involved. We get them involved with joint compressions or things like that to help calm that nervous system. And so it's definitely tricky. I'm definitely on the floor probably most of the time playing with kids and finding ways to adjust them. But if you find a chiropractor that's pediatric trained, they know we're mostly on the floor and we're really quick to be able to figure out what's going on neurologically. And so with a lot of the kids that have been initially were didn't even want to get touched and would yell and all that. We found really cool ways to work with those kids, and it's really exciting when parents are like, oh my goodness, my kid is able to focus now in school, and we're seeing the reflexes are not there anymore. So when I touch along their spine, they're not jumping like that. So yeah, we see that all the time. Touch is a huge one. It's the last part of the nervous system to lay down before we have all those sensory primitive reflexes. So.
And I can say that's one thing I really saw with Nathaniel was the first times we came here, he would run away. He would never sit still for an adjustment. And he really wasn't too huggy or huggy-feely or anything like that. But after a few months of doing chiropractic, he would actually ask me, Mommy, rub my arm, please. Or Mommy, rub my back, please. And he'd want to cuddle, and he'd say cuddle, cuddle, and then now he just pops up on to the little bed to get adjusted. So he has transformed as far as touch. He was a kid that if you would hug him, he'd just kind of wiggle out of it. He was very uncomfortable, and now he just he loves touch. He asks me to rub him. He even likes essential oils being put on his neck. So even really weird senses of touch he enjoys. So yeah, that's definitely a big one that I've experienced personally. How would people find a chiropractor like you or like Mama's that deals with both pregnant women all the way through, the baby being born, newborn, and all the way, following the child through his, school years and all of that. Because I know adult chiropractors are pretty different when you walk into their office, so.
Yeah, it's pretty different. If you're not trained through the ICPA, the International Pediatric Chiropractic Association, then you don't necessarily know, and you don't have the tools. And so I had a lot of chiropractors that would be like, okay, well, I'll send you the babies and the moms because I don't know necessarily what to do with them. Just getting adjusted, is really helpful for the nervous system, but we're specialized in sensory systems and just a lot of other things. And so how you would find that is going on the ICPA, the website, so International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, and you can say find a chiropractor, and you will be able to put in your zip code and see what chiropractor is in your area. So on the ICPA website, you'll have chiropractors that are that have after their name will have the DACCP, which means that they have the diplomate. They've gone through the 14 seminars, they've done the research and submitted those case reports and have passed the exam. And so that would be a pediatric chiropractor that works with kids, understands the sensory system.
Okay, so a lot of people aren't going to be able to find a chiropractor, or if they're not, what are some things that they can do at home with their kids if they're not able to get to a chiropractor?
I hope you guys can find one because it'll change your kids' lives and through their nervous system, right? Because that's what we live our life through is our body. And so, things that you can do at home. First, we need to kind of figure out where's your kid at sensory-wise, or in that first part of their nervous system that they're laying down the sense of up and down. They startle easily, movements and swings, they don't understand where up and down is yet. And so with kids like that, doing activities like up and down, doing upside down time, playing, a lot of spinning and things like that. So there's going in circles in a chair and challenging that, going to the park a lot will be the best for those kids to figure out where is up and down. The next one will be the figure out where my body parts are in space with having eyes closed. Activities that you can do with that is also going to the park, challenging that. You can, we encourage a lot of parents to go to, we have a place called Little Gym, or even like any gymnastic gyms that allow kids to go on balance beams and do things like that, because that's what we used to do before we had tablets and all that, right?
Right.
To really help with that part of the nervous system. And then the last one, the touch one, which a lot of kids we see that are in school, they still have a lot of those touch ones with their feet, their hands. You can stroke on their hands and their hands will go kind of crazy because it's tickly. It shouldn't be tickly, it shouldn't be loud. And so you can even stroke on your kid and see that their hands will move or their mouth will move on their face, if their face gets tickled, on their foot, if their foot gets tickled, along their back. And so for the sense of touch, you can do things like I said before, Play-Doh. You can give them games at home, like there's this special sand that like sticks together. A lot of things that'll challenge that for kids is a really good gift to buy them when they're in this window. And so figuring out kind of what's a good gift for Christmas, so you can let grandparents know, that'll really help that kid with their sensory system, so that you can feed that, so that then the brain's like, okay, I understand what it is, I'll stop seeking all the time for that information, and we can move on from that and understand what normal feels like. So
Okay, cool.
yeah.
I think those are all the questions I have. So thank you so much for being on my episode today. And hopefully we've inspired somebody to get chiropractic care for their child.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely get the word out, because so many parents come to us and they're like, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're trying to get our voices out there, but a lot of people don't necessarily know what we do and how we're the providers that can help the most with stimulating that part of the brain and evaluating it, so that we can give the kids that chance of non-invasive health care. Before we have to, move on to other measures, and we can at least figure out what doors to knock on and be that resource for you guys. So definitely, share with your other moms that are struggling that chiropractic is a huge help with that. So
awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye. Sit down. Sit down, bud.
was the password. Hold on. You have to sit.
You have to sit up, buddy. Come on.
Have a seat, please. 1, 2, 3. Okay, mister, I have a surprise. Have a seat.
Sit up, buddy. She has a surprise for you.
Okay, let me show you something. We're gonna play a game.
Sit.
You see this? This is a magic paintbrush. And I'm gonna draw a shape. Can you tell me what shape this is? Ooh. So what you can do with your kids at home, especially if they have hypersensitive touch reflexes, like if this tickles them or if this tickles them, you can go at night or throughout the day, you can play games and like have them guess shapes, paint along their arms, draw them mustaches and things like that, and that helps feeding that reflex so that then they can integrate it. The body needs to figure out that sense of touch. And so this is a good way. You can paint the feet, paint the hands, paint the face. Those are all the
Cool. And that's just a normal paintbrush that you'd buy anywhere.
We call it a magic paintbrush, and the kids will they'll go home and they'll start painting themselves, and that's just a good way of integrating those reflections. Yeah, you can paint yourself. And so what you can do for joint compressions, that helps calm down the nervous system. It's really good to do before naps, before bedtime. You just kind of lightly distract and hold back together. Distract, hold back together. You can do that at the wrist, at the elbow, distract, back together, distract, back together. At the shoulders you hold, at the hips you hold. Same thing on the ankle, you just kind of distract lightly and then back together. It gives the body good awareness of where the joints are in space, and it helps calm down the nervous system. So it's a really good trick to do before bed.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mommy.